your family name, Brandon? How do
You
I
got
say it
it.
right?
Gentile. Gentile is the Italian pronunciation. So
Gentile.
Gentile. Yeah,
That's cooler, man.
it
That's
is.
cooler. Um, and I've decided to. So because I do the MSGR Monday show, I thought the Sunday one should be Sabbath Sundays because then it's SS and got the MM on the Monday.
Hmm.
But actually, decided more than a year ago, thanks to an idea from you, Brandon, to call it "Two Christians Walk Into a Bar." Remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think initially the name was
Yeah.
oh man, what was it? Like a I don't know what it was, a Christian, a Catholic, and
Yeah.
a Jew all walk into the bar or something like I don't know, Christian, a Catholic. No, that's the joke. Sorry. The joke is that the rabbi,
Yeah.
the priest, all walk in the bar. Yeah, it was a Christian and a Catholic walk into a bar or something like that.
Because that's
Oh
what we
man.
are. Yeah, we were
Yeah.
talking about it. I was telling you I want to do this Christian
Yeah.
content and introduce Christians to Bitcoin and make them understand that saving in dollars actually is helping evil, and it's non-Christian, it's non-Catholic, it's
Yep.
non-godly,
Yep.
and that saving in Bitcoin is much more aligned with faith, and the principles of not having this built-in policy of stealing. So yeah, I was telling you about that a year ago, and only now actually, Brandon. And good to see you, by the way.
It's
Welcome
great to
here.
see you.
For
Miss you.
those who don't know, like Brandon and we go back. I think it's probably only 2.5 years, but it
Two and
feels
a half.
like
Yeah.
a decade.
Yeah.
Uh, like we
Yep.
met, I think, at Pacific Bitcoin
The first one.
2022,
Yeah. Yep. Sitting on
and
the Palisades, looking over the ocean. Yeah, that was a great time. Never
it
forget that.
was, and I always have so much fun when I'm around you. Uh,
Same.
and then I told you about I Christians have a calling, and I figured out what my calling is. It was through prayer, actually, and it came to me. It's to educate Christians about Bitcoin, because there's a lot of Christians, Catholics, whatever. I'm just using
Hmm.
that term for anyone believing in Christ, that
Yep.
that Bitcoin is the only money really that is aligned with their faith outside of gold, maybe.
Yep.
And then we're talking about names, and you came up with a name. So cadeau to you, because you're a Catholic and I'm Christian, that
Nope.
a Catholic and a Christian walk
It
into a bar.
works. Exactly. Just for today. For today.
But yeah, but I think I should roll with that and just use that going forward. It also opens up a little bit for people understanding that it's not a sermon. It is also a little bit fun and games.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I am just having coffee here. It's nothing, and some water, but yeah, it's with that attitude. But what have you been up to, man? What's going on?
Just trying to teach a bunch of young Bitcoiners, our four little ones. You and I, first off, again, I appreciate you having me on. I feel it's my calling as well. Obviously playing hockey my whole life, you don't really, you're not surrounded by people that are necessarily going the right direction, or at least in your eyes. I shouldn't say going the right direction. It might be the right direction for them, but it was just people that I realized that weren't going the direction I wanted to be going. And so, years of playing hockey my whole life, and then playing professional for a handful of years, and then getting hurt, and you're just praying a lot, and which way should I be going, Lord? And I retired when I was 24 and 25, and I was just on the ascension, playing single A, then double A, then triple A, but getting hurt and just realizing this wasn't the calling for me, and realizing it really had happened years before. And it could be, you see it in relationships, you see it in, whether it's a relationship, with Christ, or people falling away from Christ or whatever, or it could be relationships with other people. It was my relationship with hockey to a degree, where the relationship with hockey for me died probably 8 years earlier, and I just hadn't realized it yet. And that's like this rationalization that I think humans, we have this coping mechanism of rationalizing things, and just trying to find a logic of why we're doing it at that time. So it was something for me for a long time was very political growing up, outside of hockey, and then seeing the great financial crisis when I was leaving Michigan State in 2009, seeing that happen right as you're entering the workforce in essence. And I saw my friends, they're leaving, they're scattering, they're going all over trying to find jobs. And you're wondering like, whoa, this political machine that I thought maybe one side had it right and the other side didn't. Now they're all doing the same thing. Bush and Obama, they're doing the same things. They're doing bailouts together. It was just like, what's going on? They're shoving socialized medicine down our throats. And I know people like always push back on that, but it's like whenever government is entering some type of entity, some private entity, that's therefore some type of socialized government coercion. And so I don't know, again, unfortunately, people, you have to go through, unpack all these layers, but the point being is that you're seeing that it's not red versus blue, it's the state versus you. And that's what really woke me up to that. And so that led me down the rabbit hole of finding Robert Kiyosaki and Mike Maloney, Gold and Silver, reading The Creature from Jekyll Island and all these things. And so that led me down this path of trying to figure out what my calling was. And so that's right when I was starting to play professional hockey, and you have a lot of time on your hands. And so I'm doing a lot of studying and reading monetary history. And then you figure out very quickly, there's a game being played. So by 2010, 2011, I'd figured out there's a real game being played on all of us. And it was through the monetary system. And that's where only a handful of years later, so I got into real estate once I retired in 2012, 2013. And I was, in gold and silver and saving in that, and then investing in real estate and thinking that was the right path. And in the fiat system, that was probably the best path you had. And at least it seemed that way. And I think it is. But then Bitcoin came along in 2015, 16, I'm hearing about that. I'm, like, what is this? And then it became very clear pretty early on that, well, this is the thing. And again, Bitcoin, it can be this 4-letter word to people, but it's what the properties that Bitcoin has that make it special. It's not just because it has the name Bitcoin. You can't just name something Bitcoin and, oh, it's Bitcoin. So that's the properties that Bitcoin contains that give it the best chance to survive in this world that we're currently living in. So, everything became, okay, I got to start transitioning my life over those next few years to Bitcoin somehow. I got rid of my real estate team by like 2020, early 2020s. And once, all the lockdowns happened and you're looking at things like, wow, like I really didn't think the world's going to go this way. And in America, we're going to do these things you read about in history books, things I was reading for 20 years. So that's where you and I met. I just got rid of my real estate team and I was like, I'm jumping into Bitcoin. And this is what my whole life had been about. I never knew what I wanted to. So to answer some of your questions, like, what have you been doing lately? We have 4 kids now. We're homeschooling them. So life's pretty chaotic, but you start answering all these questions. You're going through all these layers as these 20-year, quickly in 5 minutes, and giving 20 years of learning and discovery and peeling back layers of, holy cow, there's a game being played, and it's played at every single level. I mean, politics is a game. Obviously, the money is the game. The education system's a game. It's all designed to keep you in this invisible cage. It's an invisible prison in your mind. And like, why isn't school teaching about Bob Proctor and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and personal development and using your higher faculties and not just your 5 senses? And why isn't it teaching us about money? Why isn't it like all these things that it's just like, so it's really this wild ride, this wild journey. And unfortunately, you can't see it. I mean, I thought I was very well-rounded, very smart in 2013, 15, 16, and then Bitcoin comes along and you realize there's still another like 10 or 20% that is there that you didn't realize. You can't see it from the fiat system. And that's what Bitcoiners tend to see generally, is they have this extra level that gives them like these first principles and these natural law, the view of things that, again, even libertarians don't have. There's a lot of people that can't see it. It's impossible to see from that fiat system. So that's what I've been doing. We just got back 3 weeks in Florida, and we can do it because we're homeschooling kids, and we're we've designed our life in a way the last 15 years that we can go do things like that. By the grace of God, we can go do those things. And he gave me that ability. I mean, I stumbled upon this stuff, and there's honestly 15 years ago, I was in the grocery store and I stumbled down Robert Kiyosaki and ironically Donald Trump's book, Why We Want You to Be Rich. So it was those two that kind of just shifted my life. It was like a $3 book in the bargain bin in the grocery store. And it's, you have to have the ears to hear and the eyes to see. And that's, again, going back to the Bible, and you have to be open to those things, because most people unfortunately aren't, that's the one question I was telling my wife yesterday. That's the one question I don't understand, is money is kind of the highest order of society, in a way of organizing society, outside of religion, we'll say, or Christ. And almost seemingly no one cares to learn about money. They'll trade all their hours every single day for something they know nothing about. What am I trading it for? So that's kind of been my life purpose, going back to again, your question of what have I been doing, and then also like what's the calling, what's the passion, etc. Is how can we in Christ help people that they have the big picture, but in like in this spiritual realm, and how can we help them here on earth? And that's what I look at like Bitcoin as, is like, how can we help the earthly beings, all of us on earth here? How can we do with the gifts and talents that God's given us? How can we, and the things we know, we've been blessed to know, that the average person doesn't know, or whatever the reason they don't know is, how can we help those people? And that's kind of what we're doing. So it goes back to, again, like I said, this homeschooling the kids. It starts there. I realized the only thing I can really change is my children and my wife. I can help them, and then it kind of works its way out from there. So put your own mask on first, and trying to focus on that and be present with the family. I help Aladdin with Bitcoin trading cards when I can, and then I run my podcast. But it's not a ton of time. I don't put tons and tons of time into. I'm not working 80 hours a week, because I have my family, which is my number one priority. And it's schooling them and spending time with them. So doing that first, and then how can I educate and help others with the other time that I do have? And because that is my passion, and the thing that for 25 years of my life, I've been thinking about and feeling like, well, God, why do I know these things? Why does the average person seemingly not care? And why do I know these things? And it's like, almost like, as it's kind of like, feels like a burden at times, where you're like, why do I know these things? And yet seemingly no one wants to talk to you or care to give it the time of day or whatever it is. They would rather just go and gripe and complain about it instead of do something about it. And that's been the hardest thing for me to grasp for 25 years. But Bitcoin has been the one thing where I finally realized, hey, this is the thing. We can remove ourselves from politics, not remove ourselves from politics, but it can work around politics, government, the sly roundabout way, where we can start trying to clean up hopefully a good chunk of society. And it's helping Christians, people understand that, hey, these, like you said, you're the one that really made me start thinking about, a year and a half ago, about the Bitcoin being in alignment with the commandments, and how fiat is not in alignment with the commandments. And at that time, and it's something we can talk about today. Obviously, I know you talk about, but it's so profound. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's so profound. You're just like you almost fall off your chair. So those are some of the deep talks we've been over time. But anyway, that's the long, my history. So you asked a simple question of what have I been up to lately, but that's my simple question of what I've been up to, very quickly. What have I been up to for 20 years, and also what I'm doing recently.
Dude, I love it. I love it, Brandon. I think this must be like what it feels like to interview a sailor, right? You ask one question, and then you get all this wisdom and this beauty of content that you. I love it, brother.
Oh man,
There's several things. Like, I'd love to hear more about the homeschooling, but you just said here last one thing that you said, it was I part of making you think how fiat currency, and for those who don't know what fiat currency is, it is basically the monetary system that we have, the dollar, where there's no asset backing it, only the debt of the US government and their promise to pay it back. There's no actual value. Like back when gold was when the dollar was backed by gold, it was there was assets behind it. There is no assets behind the dollar anymore. So fiat currency is just pretend paper money. And I say pretend because money, if you look it up in the dictionary, can store value over time. And fiat currency, because there's no backing, they keep printing more and handing it out to the people closest to the printer, the money printer. They benefit, and it impoverish the rest of us. Tricky word. So you're saying that I have an influence on you seeing how that is like not aligned with
yeah,
scripture, the commandments,
yeah,
or that's awesome.
yeah. I have a draft of a book, just for the love of money, and it's one of the things that Christians have a really hard time with, of thinking that money is evil. and they forget the other part of this. And you and I have talked about this a long time ago, but it's, for the love of money is the root of all evil. When you're idolizing other things, and it could be money, it could be whatever it is, when you're idolizing other things aside from the Lord, that's when you start getting into trouble. And for whatever reason, Christians have had a really hard time just delineating that and understanding the difference between that. And they kind of forget one part of that verse. And I'm in that group. And I think for a long, and it wasn't like a conscious thing even, right? It's just subconscious a lot of times, which is more sinister because it's your paradigm. It's what you don't even think about. It's just your habits. And as you kind of take those paradigms or habits from other people, and you don't even realize you're doing it. It's just like the filter all your thoughts go through, which is your subconscious. So that's been the thing that of just reworking that in my mind over the last 15 years, but then really specifically over the last few years. And then you specifically where the commandment thing, I just hadn't got that point. So the point with the book is I wanted to help Christians, and I still at some point I'm going to write that book. I'm working on some other things right now, the podcast and some other smaller books about the American Revolution and Bitcoin, stuff like that. But this book is going to be a bigger book, and it's kind of scary to tackle in a way, but specifically you with the commandments, I had not got to the point of just thinking about the commandments and how money fits into the commandments actually. So that's where you were just like, one day we were sitting there and you were just rocking out like multiple commandments where like, yeah, fiat, breaks this one, it breaks that one, it's theft. It's like you're going through and I'm like sitting like, dang, like I just never had gotten to that point of thinking of that just straight up the 10 commandments, which are the most simple things obviously to follow. And if it's real quick, I probably shared that story before too, but there was like this old, nun or whatever. She was going to visit prisoners, and she would go in all the time and talk to them and just, help them and read to them or whatever it was. And one day one of the prisoners looked at her and was just like, sister, it's just, this world's pretty crazy. It's wild. It's, how many laws there are that put me in this place or that can put you in this place. And she's like, yeah, like that is pretty wild. She's like, did you know that there are 10 that can keep you out? And it's just like, life is so simple. And and not only that, Christ, like we had 10 that God gave to Moses, but then like there's really 2. Christ was like, there's really 2. You can actually synthesize all of life down to 2 commandments. And we just as humans, we mess it up, like we try to overcomplicate everything. We all do it. I do it. I'm as we say in hockey, you're gripping the stick too tight. Or maybe if you're batting, you're playing baseball, you're gripping the bat too tight. You just got to play loose. You're gripping the golf club too tight, whatever it is. Like you just got to play loose, use your intuition, don't overthink things. And that's where coming back to you, just some of those commandments, it's so simple. And you don't need to stray outside of that. When you start realizing and you start putting fiat currency or Bitcoin up to the test in a way, it's what passes that test. And then it becomes very clear, very obvious. You don't need to spend 10,000 hours studying Bitcoin. You could just look at some of the properties and be like, which money, or which, I shouldn't say fiat's not money, it's currency, but which currency fits this paradigm that I want to live in. It becomes very easy. So you're the one that helped me specifically with some of those things, and just opening my eyes to just straight up, like you can kind of cut to the chase and very quickly and easily see that one passes the test and one doesn't.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're working on a big book now.
Yeah, so the Christianity book, it'll probably be bigger, and that's why I've kind of like I've shelved it for a while. This is right when you and I met like 2.5 years ago. I had an outline for it. I have more of it now, but it's still not close to being done. Right. But I have a couple of smaller books. One on like sports in Bitcoin, and they'll probably be like 100 pages. Excuse me, 100 pages of American Revolution in Bitcoin and sports in Bitcoin. How sports has been radically changed. I've seen obviously in hockey. You see, excuse me, you see football. You see all these sports dominated by. Fiat has now, guys can't even play the game. I mean, NBA guys don't even play games. NFL, you have guys that you can't hurt the quarterback. You can't touch anybody because now it's like the guy's worth so much fiat and he's so important to the sport. Or you take into gambling, fantasy sports. Well, why is gambling increased? Why has fantasy sport? Why have all these things increased so much? Why are people running away from their lives? Why are they trying to go hit the lottery and go get more fiat currency? It's because life's running away from them, right? This whole system's designed for life to keep getting more expensive and to squeeze the middle class and the poor person and to just keep squeezing everything out of them in their life force. They can't focus on anything but hopefully playing the lottery or taking illegal or legal drugs, whatever it is, to sedate themselves out of reality and to just get away. And when you go back into like communism, you go back into history, you see again very quickly that the governments, when they become, you know, corrupt and they become, you know, past their due expiration date, they go down these roads of trying to just, you know, off their people in essence, or sedate them and just get them to just like go away. Like, let me do what I'm going to do. I'm going to run your life basically. And that's where we're at, unfortunately. So yeah, those are the two books I'm working on. And the American Revolution one is like, I've just come to this thought or the realization of, we're at a point where like the American Revolution was 3% of people basically that were like, I've had enough. I grabbed my musket and I'm going. And most people were not, they didn't care. They're just like, that's what everyone thinks, like, oh, all these Americans or all these people, all these, you know, immigrants came over, and some were here still and some were coming over on boats. I mean, they all did at one point, obviously, right? And they're all just like, oh, this is great. Well, most of them didn't care. I mean, most of them were like, oh, the king's good. He's fine. You know, like whatever, you know, and a lot of them they were ratting out, they were tattling on the patriots who were fighting against the British. And, you know, so you saw a lot of it in the last 5 years. We witnessed a lot of that over the last 5 years here in America. And so it's just history repeating, but you start realizing that Bitcoin is going to probably go the same way. It's going to be a small and transigent minority that won't shut their mouths, won't shut their yappers. They won't stop making memes. They won't stop being ridiculous. And they are going to be the ones that pull the rest of society forward. And then the 97% get to have the benefit of freedom. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, everyone in America that wasn't for the revolution, they still won. Like, the patriots won the war, and then they got freedom too. Like, they got the Bill of Rights. They got all these things that there was a couple of percent of people, and that percentage grew a bit over time, but not that much. I mean, it wasn't, you know, everyone argues on the numbers, 10%, 25% eventually, or forward, or, you know, whatever. But the people fighting were very few just overall. So I think it's going to be the same thing with Bitcoin. Doesn't mean that, you know, again, the moral story is, don't look for everyone to come be like, oh, this is truth, you guys are right. I mean, look at Christ, the same thing. Like, he was ultimate truth. He was the truth. They killed him. You know, like, at the end of the day, it should give you hope. It shouldn't give you fear. Just know that, hey, I'm going the right way. And if people are criticizing me, or they're not believing me, or they don't want to talk to me about it, it's probably a good thing in a way. Like, people are going to have to touch a stove and get burned in order to learn lessons. And truth is truth. And again, humans have this rationalization, you know, thing inside of them. We all do, where we try to rationalize what's happening right now, instead of really just continually beating on the truth and saying, okay, how can I get better? What can I change? What are we, you know? So anyway, that's those are some of the books I'm working on, but just some of the thoughts I'm always just pondering in my mind.
No, but that's awesome. It's exciting, and it's you're going very wide, and I know you're going to get deep there as well. But you mentioned stove, and I'll use that as an excuse for making myself another cup of coffee while we speak. It's a laptop; I can bring it with me. But I have one cup of coffee. I do feel like another one. It's earlier Sunday morning here for me than it is for you. But I do want to get into, as I head over there, Brandon, you because I think that's what I really want to emphasize and explain to Christians, so they wake up and start rejecting the dollar as something that they save in, but start using other vehicles that are not diluted, that don't break commandments, like Bitcoin, for instance. Now, I know you could also, like you said you did earlier on, save up in real estate, you know, like buy real estate, rent it out, whatever. That comes with a lot of work, and the return maybe is not quite it's not the same. So let's dive a little bit into that. How you see that fiat currency, aka the dollar, that isn't backed by anything, but it's printed out of thin air. Like, let's talk about how that breaks the commandments, how that is not a Christian or Catholic, or it's not aligned with the commandments that Moses gave us.
Yeah, boy. And real quick first too, with the real estate stuff, that was one of my realizations with real estate was, again, I interviewed Terrence a couple weeks ago, and that I'm going to drop that in a couple weeks with him. We kind of went all into real estate and Bitcoin, and it's real estate. I always think of it, real estate's like the top of the well, I guess I would say it's the stern of the Titanic in essence. So like the Titanic's going into the water, fiat currencies are all sinking into the ocean, and real estate seems like it's the best. It seems like it because it's the last to go into the water. So it seems great. And it's like, all these things, like you said, you just don't think of the knock-on effects. Like I had a team of people that we were trying to search for properties, market for properties. We're sending mailers, we're doing Facebook ads, we're doing all this stuff. And it was, thousands and thousands of dollars to run the team, to market for properties. And you'd get like, a property here and there. You'd find, just the juice wasn't worth. And so I'm looking at it, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And I'm looking at it, and this was, whatever, 5 years ago. And I'm like, if I'm having, like, imagine the average person, they can't save in dollars. And then it's like, oh, I'm going to go into real estate, I'm going to do whatever. I had 10 years of experience of doing it. And then, and even at that point, it was costing me that much money to do it. You had people doing it, callers, you had systems and automated, all this, whatever, back-end stuff and CRMs. And you're sitting there thinking like, life shouldn't be this difficult. And we were doing it. And it's like you said, like, was the juice worth the squeeze? Like, yeah, we're making out a little bit. And like maybe 30 years from now, it makes a lot more sense. And like, we've paid these loans down or whatever. But you're sitting there looking at like, is the average person, like, did God really create this earth for like, only genius, 180 IQ people to be able to live life? Like, no, of course not. And so like all these things become very obvious in retrospect when you're kind of looking back, or at least you see when you're off the Titanic, which Bitcoin is the life raft off the Titanic, where it's hard to see the ship listing or sinking when it's taking on water in the beginning, those first couple hours. And it's very tough. And that's the dollar. That's the dollar reserve system, where we have this world where it's been like that forever. No one questions it. And then you finally get off the Titanic, and then it becomes very obvious. Like, whoa, this thing is sinking. And then you're yelling back and forth at each other, like, get off the Titanic. And they're like, no, you guys are crazy. Like, you're in that little life raft, this little volatile asset in this big, black, dark sea. Good luck, and you're kind of like yelling back and forth at each other. And that's this dichotomy. And then eventually it's going to go down to the bottom of the ocean. And real estate's on that Titanic, gold and silver, like all these things. Gold and silver is a little bit different. I mean, maybe, I don't know what the analogy is, but gold and silver, the problem with gold and silver is, and we touched on this earlier briefly, is it always goes back to fiat currencies. Like, you're forced to use fiat because you can't move gold and silver, obviously, at this rapid rate we need in society today. So gold and silver inherently aren't bad. Like, they're great assets. I mean, great gold and silver. I love gold and silver, but you can't do commerce, unfortunately, in this world with final settlement with gold and silver. So that's the problem. But all the other asset classes, stocks, everything is just going to the bottom of the ocean on the Titanic. So that's real estate. So I'm realizing that, and it's like, if I'm struggling this much to just find a property, spending that much just to do the one deal or whatever it is, just imagine the average person, and you're sitting around like looking like this should be much easier. And then that's when it really started dawning on me, where the lockdowns are happening and real estate, all these problems. And I'm just like, okay. So that was the real estate part. Then you look into, like you said, the commandments, and so you have idolization, right? So you're idolizing, people are idolizing the dollar, right? I mean, dollars all over the place. It's all because things are constantly running away from you, so you're forced to continually find more dollars. And it's not so much that like, oh, I'm idolizing this piece of paper, but you're forced to make decisions all the time that might go against what you believe, or go against your family, or go against time with your family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if I always love the experiment of like, if you had $100 million right this second in fiat, it doesn't matter whatever it is, but like in fiat, or $100 billion, what would you be doing? And that question to every single person should be very illuminating, because then that tells you, well, that's probably what you're called to do. That's and it's not a perfect absolute, but that starts getting the person thinking of like, well, what would I be doing? Would I be working this corporate job? Would I be working over here? Would I be spending 80-hour weeks away from my family? What would I be doing? And so obviously someone would say, Brandon, why? I can't do that right now. Of course I want to be with my family. Well, that's the point. You have to start working towards some type of solution that gets you more towards that, and to get you to your calling, your genius zone, more time with your family, whatever it may be. So that idolization of, well, I'm putting money, and again, that I'm not immune to this. We all battle with this, which is, 5 years ago, am I going to put this substance in my body, even though it go against my morals, I go against my belief structure, it goes against just intellect, whatever it might be. And people do it because they're scared that the paycheck won't come in. They're scared of whatever the ramifications might be, instead of saying, and I'm not, and this is a good example, but it's also, think of this example in any other aspect of your life, whether you're going against the commandments or you're going against something. So, bringing up the commandments again, right? So it's, am I going to go against this because it's going to get me more material things on earth? Or am I going to idolize God? Am I going to idolize the one true thing that matters the most? And am I going to trust him, like the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, like he provides for them? Will he not provide for us? And that's something we as humans, like, it's just constant, like, battle back and forth of like, I trust you, Lord. Like, oh no, I trust you. Like, oh no, I want to be in control. So it's like this constant battle back and forth. So anyway, I would love your thoughts on this, because this is just like one of them. Like, I think of the very first one that came to my head of like just idolization, and then all the ramifications of idolization.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, that with money, we can end up idolizing it. But you could say that us Bitcoiners who are very strongly believing about Bitcoin and Bitcoin being the solution, there's also, I would say, idolization of Bitcoin in the Bitcoin community, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But so, I mean, I would say I see Bitcoin as a solution. I see Bitcoin as the sword of God being driven into the heart of evil. So for me, the fact that inflation is that we are told to accept inflation when it comes to the dollar, they have taught us that it's in our best interest that we have 2% inflation a year. Just a random number grabbed from somewhere, that it's in our interest that our savings lose 2% value a year. And that is straight up theft. It's an unnecessary and built-in mechanism of theft in fiat currency, that we're going to take 2% of its value every year. And by the way, it's actually more, but because you could just look at how much is the money supply inflated, which the last, I think, 50 years has been average 7% a year. So actually it's a lot more, but they run around and measure different things to be able to say, well, it's only 2%. And obviously since COVID, it's been a lot more. But with currencies like the dollar or the euro or Danish crowns or whatever, it's a built-in policy to steal the value, and that is straight up going against, morals and ethics and the commandments. Thou shalt not steal. And even if we hold the dollar and allow them to steal from us by printing more and taking it's like, I think it's a Jack Mallows that say, no man should have to work for what other can print out of thin air.
Yep.
And that's the problem with fiat currency, that it essentially it's theft, but they've given them some words and got people to accept it, that's what we do. It dilutes savings. It dilutes the purchasing power of people's salary. Like, people used to be able to buy stuff for their salary, and now the minimum wage, the hourly wage, and then after tax, you can't buy anything for that. Like, people can't save up to down pay a home anymore. So that's a theft mechanism that is built in to the dollar and the euro, just because they call it something else, just because they have managed to convince people, well, I don't understand money and economics, but they're saying it's good for me that the money that we have, price is rising, so I guess that's how we keep our jobs. But reminder, everyone had a job also before we went to fiat currency with inflation. Back when US was on a gold standard, was actually the highest growth in productivity that US has ever seen, from 1873 till 1892, so a period of 20 years. The productivity in US went up almost with a factor 3 in a period where we didn't have internet, we didn't have computers, like we were on the steam engine, right?
Mhm.
But productivity grew a lot because we had good allocation, free market allocation of capital, where capital went where it generated most value. While now we have an artificial allocation of capital with the price of capital being the interest rate, which is artificial. It's generated by a board of well, at the Fed, right? The board of directors at the Fed that decide the interest rate. And we have come to the conclusion that communism and central planning doesn't work. Like we know that even in US, but that's essentially what it is. The most important commodity in any economy is money, because it makes up half of all transactions. But we've decided, instead of having the free market to set the price of this one half, the most important commodity in any economy, which is the interest rate, is the price of money. That's what it costs to borrow money through time. That we're setting it like Soviet style. Well, let's have a committee of people. They know better than the market, but they don't. And that's why I think we have, despite having internet and computers and all of these things, that productivity growth has gone down, because we're doing Soviet style allocation of capital now. It's not free market. But bottom line, the interest rate, the inflation that we are made to accept, is allowing them to steal from us. And I would argue that that one thing is that we allow them to steal from us, and they're like, oh, you're not doing anything wrong because you're not the one stealing. But when you hold the dollar and save up in the dollar and use that, you're also giving your network effect to the dollar staying as the money that people are using and saving in. So you are enabling them to continue the theft. You're enabling them to continue to steal from all of us, because you're upholding it being alive. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, once like once you see the wizard behind the curtain, now, because again, I don't blame the people that don't know. I don't blame them. Like, they just don't know. We were all there at one point, but the people that do know, well, now So now are you going to compromise? And now we go back to what we said earlier. You're going to compromise on what you know, on truth, and idolize the paycheck? Or are you going to idolize these things? Or are you going to do the right thing? Or are you going to do, and Jeff Booth talked about that all the time, right? Like once you kind of know that, you might play this game for a while, and we all do, I'm sure, most of us. I would show me the person that, immediately day one just turned everything into Bitcoin. I'm sure they're out there. It does happen, but vast majority of people, it's a process over time where you're realizing, like, this is immoral. And then, like you said, the more energy I give this immoral system, I'm just perpetuating that network. So why am I doing that? And I think that's where a Bitcoiner comes to this realization at some point, whatever that point might be, and however long it takes them to get there, and they realize, what in the world am I doing? And you just start, that's where, like, those memes of, like, I have 1% allocation, then 10%, then 30%, 50%, 80%. Like, you just, as that education grows, you just start realizing more and more and more. And I should say too, I should go back to this, and it's a rationalization thing, which we've talked about multiple times. The rationalization mechanism is not a bad thing either. I was talking to my wife about this, and if the world was built with people like you and me, or like many Bitcoiners, it'd be a volatile world. It could be a very wild world, because all of a sudden you have, like, early adopter people. Generally, at least from my perspective, they tend to just pick up patterns very quickly, and they're always, either want to be on the forefront of things. They're maybe contrarian, whatever. Like, we all have some of these different personality traits. Well, can you imagine if all society was like that? It would just be wildly, like, one day we're doing this, and the next day all 8 billion people are doing the next. So vast majority of human beings are just very comfortable just like being, which is a good thing. In society as a structure, God built it clearly in a certain way, so we're not like cannibalizing ourselves and just constantly at violent war with each other. So you have these not game changers. I'm trying to think of, but you have these people, that a couple percent of people, like we talked about the Revolutionary War, who are like, we're not taking this anymore. Or it's a Satoshi, or it's a Steve Jobs, who's like, yeah, I'm not doing this old phone thing. Here's the iPhone. Like these things that really just like all of a sudden it's like Back to the Future, and it's this new space-time continuum, and everyone starts seeing it and they're like, well, yeah, you know what? I'm going to come over here. This is better. But it takes a little while for people to, it's a gold hundreds of years. I mean, really hundreds and hundreds of years to become this global thing. And that, like you said earlier, we have internet now, so it's a bit different, but it's the people, just the collective masses taking their time, which is built in purposely by God. So it's not of this violent and volatile world, or more than it could be. And then it takes time from the people, the couple percent that are like, hey, this is really wrong. Society has to kind of like adjudicate all that. It's got to kind of do its own homework over time, slowly. So I couldn't agree more with what you were saying, and just the theft. Obviously, I think of also, coveting things, right? You shall not covet your neighbor's, possessions. Basically, we'll say, to shorten it, but just coveting other people's things. Obviously, in fiat, we say that all the time, right? We're coveting other people's things because I don't have enough. It's keeping up with the Joneses. And in Bitcoin, and again, in a perfect world, I think Bitcoiners, we're very idealistic people. We tend to be. And I think that's where we sometimes you need to just get a little more of that realism in you and say, hey, we're not there this second, but it's the changers of society that are the ones pulling things forward and saying, well, this is the ideal world. This is where we should be. This is what the truth. This is what makes sense. And so that's our job, to just not get frustrated in doing that, because we don't want to have to be coveting other people's things. Again, it's humans do it. It is what it is, but fiat perpetuates that. It perpetuates that evil side. It's like, the devil on the one shoulder and the angel on the other. And it perpetuates that evil side of coveting other things when we feel we're lacking, or maybe we don't have Christ in our life as much as we should. Maybe we've fallen away. We're not asking him for help. We're not praying enough, whatever it might be. But fiat perpetuates that evil side. And I think of like the incentives, like you choose that. I love the meme where it's like, we're going to choose the Bitcoin, those two roads, Anders, where it's like, we're going to choose Bitcoin and freedom, or we can choose slavery and like CBDCs type of thing. Well, that to me, I always think of like a devil and the angel, where it's like you're choosing, which angel you're going to go after. Like, you're going to go after Lucifer, or you're going to go after, and Satan, or you're going to go after, the angel and go on God's path. And so that's where it's one side. Depending on what you pick, it's much easier. You start falling down that side of the mountain, and the speed picks up. So you start choosing fiat. Well, now I'm idolizing other things. Now I find myself coveting other things. Now it just becomes easier and easier. Like, the more lies you tell yourself, like you said, it's, well, I'm not doing it. Society is doing it. But the more you just stand by and sit by idly, you just get sucked into that. Because then I think of another, other Bible verses talking about, show me your friends, I'll show you the kind of person you are. That's, if I'm in a society of those people, well, guess who I'm going to become? I go back to my hockey example. I wanted to get away from that, because in athletics, or those worlds of entertainers, athletes, whatever, it's not a world generally filled with Christ. It's people kind of just doing whatever they want. They're generally good at their sport or the thing they're doing, because they kind of put everything else to the side and focus on just themselves. And they say, you know what, I'm the best, I'm the greatest. They have a confidence. Maybe it's wrapped in this confidence. And that's where to become very good at a lot of these things, you find a lot of people that are very confident in themselves, which is a good thing. I'm a confident person in myself. I know you are a confident person, but you have to have mixed that with humility. And a lot of the people I saw that were very, very good athletes, that were very, very good, they tend to be some of the most self-absorbed people. And so it was like, okay, we need some balance here. So anyway, all that to say, it leads you down the path you choose, puts you in company where these choices will be easier this way. Like, if you're hanging around with Bitcoiners, you're probably going to be upheld to a higher standard of life, from everything I've seen now for 5 years or so, whatever it is, 6 years of just hanging around Bitcoiners. You're upheld to what pan are you using? Is it stainless steel or is it cast iron? If you're hanging around Christians, like we're upping the level of equality of our food, our nutrition, our education, our fitness, our mental fitness, our spiritual fitness. Are you hanging around other people that are chasing God, or are they chasing false idols? That to me is this road where you choose which way I'm going to go, and a lot of it starts with the incentives structure of the currency you are choosing. And then that's where all these things fall down from. And then you get so far down the hill that the average person, that's why the average person looks at you with their eyes glazed over, because you're talking about all the ills and how Bitcoin is going to fix this. And the average person is like so far down the hill one way or wherever they're at in life that they're just looking up at you like, what in the world are you talking about, bro? Because they've never thought of it. There's so many layers to get there, so many decisions that have been made over time, which they don't even realize. And now all of a sudden they're,
there we are. So I think I lost connection real quick.
Split second. Yeah.
Split second. Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard most of what you said. So we can agree that I think obviously that people of faith, be it Catholic, Protestant, non-denomination, whatever it is, if you believe in the Ten Commandments, if you believe in Christ, here are two people that believe in Christ that are telling you that using the dollar as your tool of saving is very problematic, and that Bitcoin is way more aligned with, I would say, the only money. If you compare dollar and Bitcoin is the only money that actually is aligned with what Jesus taught us and what God told us through the commandments. Thou shalt not steal. You could almost make it to thou shalt not use the dollar, because it is a thieving mechanism. Even though they may not call it, that's what it does. That's why you've experienced inflation. That's why people are struggling. And if you continue to use it, you support that system and letting them get away with continue to use the dollar as a thieving mechanism and sucking the lifeblood out of people in society. And I know that the propaganda, the same people, the globalists, the central bankers, the deep state, that wants you to believe that inflation is good for you so you can keep your job. We got to stimulate. We got to keep stealing from you so you get to keep your job. Imagine, like, that's what people are buying into. Look, we're going to continue stealing from you so you can keep your job, because then we stimulate. Those people, they own the media machine and the mass media, which, by the way, is very cheap.
Schooling.
Yeah, schooling. No, because when I started my career I worked in the media business as on a media agency and been working with advertising, online advertising, and I remember back when the internet came out and started being used more and more. There's so little profit in running. There's so little money in running like a newspaper or like all these things, after people now can get them for free on the internet and news. So it's very affordable to own the news media and control the narrative. And I believe that that's what we're seeing. And all the negative that you've heard about Bitcoin, about money laundering and drug dealers, and it's all propaganda from the evil people that we are fighting. Don't listen to that. If you're a Christian, try and level above or apart from that critique of Bitcoin and start looking at it with fresh eyes. That's my ask of you. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to say, like, even again, another thought experiment we asked about, like, if you had $100 million, what would you do with your life? You start getting to some real core issues, but also, like, another thought experiment I always try to run people through, people who are learning or, they're early on in that journey, is why don't they tell you that? Like, why haven't they told you the things, if they're questioning the things you're saying to them or whatever, well, it's like, well, why haven't you learned any of those things? Or I find that it works probably best with people who are like in the middle. They've kind of learned some stuff already and they're kind of like really starting to question things. And so I always go to that, like, flipping it, like contrast, like, well, like, tell me why they haven't, like, why haven't you learned about money at all? Like, I mean, it's like old adage, like, people always joke here in America for the last 20 years of, they don't even teach you to balance your checkbook and blah, ha, ha, like, whatever. It's like, well, why is that? Like, why aren't, like, all these obvious things, how come they're not teaching you that? And that is like the hiding in plain sight part. Like you said, evil has incepted, a certain amount of people on this earth, and the cracked souls, cracked vessels, and evil spirits have found their way into those people. So they do things that we just would never think of. Like, it just wouldn't cross my mind to do these dastardly things. Like, I couldn't imagine it. But evil spirits are in certain people doing certain things, and I can't explain that. But that's very hard. I mean, I've had so many conversations, I'm sure I've had so many where people looked at me over the last 5 years and said, man, I used to think you were kind of crazy. Like, oh, I thought you were this, I thought you were that, but like, wow, like you turned out to kind of be right. Like, wow, like a lot of these things end up being true. And it's not because I'm a genius or Nostradamus. It's just because Bitcoiners, people that are on this path, we tend to follow history. Like you and I have talked about this for years, right? You're following, you're studying Christ, you're studying the Bible, which is, oh, by the way, it's history mixed with Christ. Like, it's like you get like the benefits of all the worlds. So it's like, if you don't understand history and you don't understand the Bible, you'll never realize, like, yeah, this has been a battle of good versus evil spirits forever, like since inception. Like, this is the game. It's good versus evil. And if we don't understand that, which the average person, again, is just like, well, I thought, I've had so many conversations just with people like, well, I thought, the people in power just had like our best interests at heart, and like they were going there to like serve us. That was like why they went there. And it's like, like you poor thing, like how can we be so naive? And that's where people have been really woken up over the last 5 years. But that's this process of touching the stove, like, and you have to, like, unfortunately, most humans have to get burned, and in order to trust what's actually going on, instead of just looking at it and saying, why don't they teach these things? Why don't we learn this? And a lot of it hides in plain sight purposely. It's like a Jason Bourne movie. It's like that. Those things are happening inside the government. They have been for the last 100 years. I mean, really forever, but like at these really deep levels and really with a lot of technology, these things have been happening all the time. They just hide them out there for people, so that way people can say, wow, wouldn't that be crazy if that was happening? Like, wow, there's no way. This is just too crazy to believe, or House of Cards, or whatever thing you want to think of. These things are all designed, and this is 100+ years of literature that has been documented saying, like, yeah, we do this or we do that, going back to whatever I'm trying to think now of, people know more of like the MK Ultras. They know the JFK, like, there's a lot of those conspiracy theories, quote unquote. And so it goes back, 50, 75 years before that, of like this modern era of like what we're living in, of like these intelligence agencies running mass psychological operations on everybody. That's this world we live in. And so we walk around with people in government schooling systems, like you said, in media, all controlled by a couple of people, like, or a couple, or we'll say a handful of massive families, banking families, or whatever it is. And here we are. So, like, of course we're gonna live in what we're living in, because no one's questioned things for 100+ years. So here we are.
If you're a Christian and haven't heard about Bitcoin, or you're negative on it, but this conversation can help you have an open mind, then some overlap of faith and Bitcoin on is there in hope.com, which is Saylor's website, where he explains a lot about Bitcoin. So I think that's worth looking into. Please have an open mind and look at Bitcoin through the spectacles of or through the narrative of scripture, and what actually is aligned with the principles of faith and what isn't. I actually have to get going, Brandon. So I know you've already been to Mass. I have that coming up. Nice. So looking forward to that. I'll end on so I had my my eyesight. I had cataract surgery in March, which is the most amazing thing. Like, I really feel I can see again, and now it's easier for me to read. And so I started now reading Book of Acts. I think everybody knows that, the story of Jesus when he was alive, but it's actually really, really interesting. Book of Acts is the first, post his death and ascension to heaven. What happened with early Christianity and the believers, and how the faith grew. And I find that really interesting, and I would recommend for people who haven't read that part, or if you're open to reading the Bible, it's really interesting to see those early days. and you start to understand, in my opinion, that Christianity couldn't have gotten to where it is today if it was just, one guy that was charismatic or something. Like, no, there were miracles happening, and that's why it could grow and did grow to the extent that where we are now with 2.3 billion Christians. But Brandon, thank you so much for being on. I would love to do this with you again if you're down for another Sunday, if it fits in, with your
try to find more, a little more consistently, once a month or something like that. We'll have to work through that for sure.
Be super happy to have you on. So, but yeah, on YouTube, we have right now, by the way, 292 live viewers. Most of them are on X. When streaming live, that's the regular picture. On YouTube, though, there is a link down below in the show notes to your X profile if people want to follow you. If is there anything else you're like hand off, something you want to tell people where they can find you or?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Anders. Yeah, I look forward to doing this more in the future. This has been a couple years in the making. You and I sitting down and starting to do this more. So I love it. And I love what you're doing. All the stuff you're doing, by the way, has been awesome over the last handful of months. What has it been? 6 months, 8 months of you doing really rocking stuff. So I love what you're doing. The last thoughts I will leave with as well is, money is the bedrock of society, and we choose the economic system above that. And so many people get it confused and think the money is just part of that system. Like, inflation is just part of capitalism and things like that. Money is the bedrock that, what you choose to build your society on. And so we need to figure that out. And that goes back to truth. Pick something that's truthful. Like we talked about with Christ being truth. If it's not truth, it doesn't last for 2,000 years. So make sure we're rooting ourselves in truth and building your house on rock instead of fiat sand. And that's the big delineation for me. I think the big thing. Again, thanks for having me on. Brandon, _Gentile, like you said, on Twitter. That's also the YouTube channel. We interview everybody. I've had you on the show before. I'll have to have you on again this year as well. I've had you on the show, I don't even know when it was, a year ago or a year and a half ago. I can't remember. But so go check that out. And then that's Playable Characters. And then last thing is, excuse me, is Bitcoin trading cards. Aladdin Flynn is the creator of that. Anders has been in the cards. I've been in the cards. Just unbelievable educational organization with art, creativity, really valuable cards. That was but the Bitcoin orange pill. And so that's an incredible company that I help as well. And they have an incredible mission. And we all have a fun time when we're all together, a very red-pilled, orange-pilled crew. So we'll leave it at that for now. But yeah, that's it. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, Brandon. And definitely looking forward to having you back. I'm having more of these conversations. I appreciate it, man.
Same,
right. So to everyone out there, thank you very much for watching. Have a great Sunday, and see you on the next show. I will likely do some MSG on Mondays tomorrow because it is Monday, but